All right. It is 1:31 Eastern time. So we will get going because I know all of you are busy and most of you are at school right now. And so we will get started. So thank you so much for joining us for creating a school culture of data-informed instruction. This is the New Year challenge, and this is the first session. So it's a two-part challenge, and in the first session, we're going to have this meeting today, this training, and then there's going to be some work for you to do if you choose to do so. It's reflection work in between this and the next session. And in the next session, we're going to dig a bit more into why your teachers might not be using their own student data. So we will get started. Here's our agenda. We're going to begin just introducing ourselves. We'll talk about what we mean whenever we say data, because I know that's really broad. We will also talk about defining culture, and we'll share with you what we're using, the framework that we're using as we talk about school culture here. And then we're going to dig a bit more into 5 aspects of school culture. We'll talk about data savvy coaching, which is a membership that we have for educational leaders, and we'll share a little bit more about that. And then we'll share with you the next steps before our next challenge. So I will introduce myself first, and then I will be turning it over to Leah in a moment to introduce herself. I am Heather Peltier, and I began actually as an English language arts teacher and then moved into a literacy coaching role. And it was really in that role that I got absolutely hooked on using student data. And I started looking at it, and I was good friends at the time with someone who actually was a statistician who did applied statistics. And I was looking at student data across 2 different classrooms and saying, I'm seeing these 2 things. And he said, well, have you considered this? Have you considered that? What about statistical significance? Are the differences you're seeing really significant, or could they be due to some of these other factors? And I thought, wow, there is a lot that I just don't know about about using data, about understanding data, and making sure that I'm interpreting it in a way that doesn't lead me down a false pathway. And that was really what captured my interest. So I started, at the time I was wrapping up an EDS degree in educational leadership. And I ended up moving into a district administration role at the time. I was first in the curriculum department, and then transitioned over to the research and assessment and evaluation department. As I got more into the data component, I began pursuing my doctorate degree, and my cognate is in educational measurement. From there, I kind of went a totally different direction from language arts teacher and became a psychometrician and really got into assessment, and ended up my most recent position for Department of Education was for Tennessee Department of Education. I was the chief assessment officer. And then I've been doing since then some consulting work with state departments of education about their testing programs, their student data, really using data to drive good outcomes for students. And so I'm just really excited to get the opportunity to share that with you all, because I think in my career, the most professionally rewarding times have been the times when I've actually gotten to work with schools. And so, so I'm excited about getting the chance to share that. So, and I will quit talking for a moment and pass it over to Leah.
Hi, I'm Leah Torres, and I started out as a science, and my background was a science teacher and a math teacher. And I had taught at an elementary, a middle school, and a high school over about 12 years. And I moved into, we never had science coaches. So in the district that I was in, they had district level coaches. And I was really it for science for the middle school level. And we use data to look at the differences between our strands. And so if a student was below proficiency, but slightly below proficiency, what we were able to realize was that they were struggling in one of our standard areas. It wasn't that they were low in physical science earth science and biology, they were only low in one of those categories. So really by leveraging that data, we were able to improve our scores, realizing where the gaps were. And that was really the first time I had used data. Before that, I didn't really have any Excel skills. I was very much, let me do, I hadn't looked at my test data in that way before. And it wasn't until I could see everybody's test data was I able to see that trend. And then from there, I went into research, evaluation, and accountability, where it was my last role, and really trying to look at that data. And in the world of filling those gaps for MTSS and RTI purposes, because a student who is right below proficiency isn't low in everything. There is something that, especially now, there's a gap because of COVID. There's a gap because there's been a substitute because of the teacher shortage. There are different gaps that were caused over the last few years that a student may still be in tier 2, but they were digital for a full year, and in 4th grade didn't understand fractions, and that has affected them in 5th and 6th and 7th. And so it's really looking at that moving forward. Times have changed drastically, and trying to get ahead of that with standardized testing has been a struggle, I think, for everyone. So really part of this is how can you start getting ahead instead of always being reactionary is really what I'm passionate about. Let's plan ahead and get in front of it instead of constantly trying to catch up, filling gaps with interventions.
Well, thank you. And I see, so we've asked everyone to, if you haven't done it yet, just type in your name, your role, and where you're joining us from in the chat. And this is amazing. We have so many people joining us. I see we've got a range of coaches, school administrators. We've got different states represented. I was saying earlier, I was speaking to someone as far away as Dubai who is joining us. So we've got an international audience. This is very, very exciting. So I also wanted to share with you really quickly, and then I promise we'll dive into the meat of it. I won't spend a lot of time in this, but our why, because that is so important to us, is really why do we do what we do? And for you to get to know us a little bit better as we're going to be, spending this time together over the next few days. So we really believe data is a window into students' learning and needs. It's a way to better understand students. Strategically using data can be an effective catalyst for student learning. And we know that educators need training and need time to analyze, discuss, and use student data. And we do believe in assessment, but we believe in purposeful assessment. It can be a really powerful tool to help student learning if it's done really well. And our mission is to serve educators, to help educators better serve their students. So we have built out the trainings and supports that we wish that we had from the beginning when we were in the classroom, when we were coaches, when we were serving as administrators. So if you, we'd like you to hang with us to the end, if you could. And the reason for that is because we are going to be sharing with you a couple things. So first is we'll share with you an opportunity for you to join us for a membership that has plug and play resources, live trainings, data-centered community meetings, but also we have a link to access the free resource that we created for you to use when you're reflecting on your own school culture. And it's an electronic workbook that we're going to have available for you to download. And we'll share that information as well. So we wanted to talk, first of all, about what we mean when we say student data, because it means a lot of different things. And data in this sense, in the sense that we're talking about it, is any information that's been gathered that helps form that complete picture of students' learning and needs. So the first thing that most people jump to when they talk about data is, of course, assessment results. But we do not stop there, and that is not all that we mean. Data could be students' attendance. It could be demographic information. It could be things like, are they English language learners? It could be gender. It could be information about their specific disabilities or accommodations. And it can also be looking at these things overlapping. So considering how these different data points overlap with or impact each other. Social emotional information that gets gathered. So Leah, I know you were speaking with me the other day about a program that your district is using right now for collecting social emotional data from students, and then you use that to look at things like the relationship between self-regulation and academic achievement.
So one thing that currently and moving forward is the social emotional piece or life skill piece, depending how you want to phrase it or how your district phrases it. And it's really how the student builds relationships with others and how well can they understand themselves and control themselves. And what we saw is that is tied to academics, and that our most struggling students are struggling social emotionally along with behaviorally, possibly in the classroom and attendance wise, and then plus academically. But trying to differentiate between different supports, a lot of times when we're thinking about an MTSS structure, we don't think necessarily about the social emotional piece or this life skills piece. And we brought that in to say, is there a support that isn't academic that the students needs to be successful moving forward with their academics, and having that tie and really looking at our intervention groups, which, are you putting the cart before the horse? If you're trying to teach a student to read and they can't regulate their emotions, and then it just becomes a behavioral piece in the classroom. So that's some work that we were doing, really coming out of the new COVID world with students who are just still struggling emotionally in schools because they were out and had interrupted learning.
And that really is that power of using data effectively to help your students as that catalyst for student achievement. Is it gives you that more complete picture, that window into what's really going on with the student. So when we're talking about data, we're not just talking assessment, we're talking about all these other well-rounded data points. And then any other qualitative data, so things like interest, career goals, digital literacy, their family situation or living situation. I know that we were also talking earlier about using a career goals survey maybe to capture students' interest and use that to hook them on reading. So maybe to help modernize the reading list or to help schools really engage with their students in terms of what they're interested in.
And helping that motivate students to be in the classrooms and understanding why literacy is important or why math is important. You have these goals, and it's also updating ourselves with this new generation to see what they are interested in, because there can be a pretty large disconnect, especially the younger ones. They all think they want to be social media influencers, and they all want to be on some form of social media and making the reels and the videos. And what does that mean? What does that take? Things like that. It's, and drawing school into that and making it so it's relevant to their lives can be really key in those situations, which is why it's not just about the academics. Sometimes it's about looking at the whole child and what they're interested in to help them with the academics.
I love this quote. And this is really why we're talking about culture today. Before we even begin talking about, digging into the data use and why this is not happening, or, why it might not be happening to the extent that you'd like it to be, or maybe as effectively as you'd like it to be, it's really all about culture. Culture is so important. When I first started teaching, I was teaching at an inner city school. And I was at one school, and there was another school just around the block that I ended up moving to and teaching to later. So I got a chance to see both of these schools, extremely similar demographics in terms of the students, in terms of the teaching population. Most schools, like You've got teachers, most of them have been through some sort of teacher program. They've all got college degrees. They're fairly similarly qualified. But one school you could walk into and it felt like a prison, like it was very much a school on lockdown. This was not a happy place of joyful learning. And the other school you went into, and it was so different. And the students were excited to be there, and they were happy, and they felt engaged. And so really what makes the difference a lot of times is culture. So it's about the type of leadership that is happening at those schools. And I know most of you on here today are instructional coaches. I absolutely believe that instructional coaches are a big part of that leadership team at the school and of building that culture at the school. And so I want to share with you a tale of two schools. And these are, this is a description of actually two schools that we have worked with in the past. And so in school A, students participate in benchmark tests 3 times yearly. The teachers develop and then submit those daily standard-based lesson plans to administrators. And they administer coach-developed weekly common assessments. So their coach is developing their common assessments, and they're administering them, and they're doing them every single week. And these assessments are aligned to the standards that teachers are supposed to be covering that particular week. They've got pacing guides, they're following them. In school B, similarly, they're participating in their benchmark tests 3 times yearly. But teachers are still developing the standards-based lesson plans, but they're doing it in 2 different ways. So they're doing it with same grade interdisciplinary teams. They have planning time built in to do interdisciplinary lesson plans, so that there's some reinforcement of content across the curriculum. And they've also got at least once weekly cross-grade departmental teams, where they're doing that vertical alignment of their lesson plans with other teachers. And then this school also develops, administers the common assessments. But in this school, the teachers themselves are the ones developing, administering the common assessments. And when they're meeting with those same grade interdisciplinary team, they are talking about what they're seeing in their student assessments. And so we would like for you in the chat box, if you don't mind, and we'll pick a few out and maybe put some of you guys on the spot to talk a little bit. Tell us something. Are you seeing that your school is more maybe like school A, where it's more, you're doing some of these things, but it might be more compliance based, and there's maybe like less digging into the data? Or are you more like school B, which really has that time allocated and that culture of teachers planning, working together, collaborating as they're doing this? So if you would just tell us, maybe if your school is more kind of like a school A or a school B right now, and what it is that you're interested in changing about your school's culture. What's really resonating with you that you would like to make a difference on? So if you could type that in the chat box. All right, it's coming. Yay. All right. So I'm seeing a few of you are saying right now, it seems like you're leaning maybe towards school A. I see Gina, you're in between A and B, which is amazing. I loved school B, by the way. I tried describing school B to another team of teachers I was working with one time, and they said, "You're making up school B." I promise you, I'm not. I love school B. Oh, really nice. All right. I see, Lori, you've got days for data digs by grade levels and are working on curriculum maps. Yeah, are those curriculum maps getting built by the teachers? Like, is that something that they're having an opportunity to have a hand in?
Absolutely. What we started, and we have a new administrative team in our central admin. And what we've started working on is we have a consultant who's coming in and talking about standards and unpacking standards and bundling them. And they purchased us a software platform so we can build this. And then we had opportunities over the summer, and we have a curriculum team that's volunteers from the different grade levels who are coming in and building out the curriculum. And we have everybody is getting the opportunity, including the special areas. We have art teachers, music teachers who are there building their curriculum too, and we're kind of working on all of that right now.
Nice. That's really nice. That's outstanding. Really good to hear. And I see also, so Jana, I see that you guys have got planning time allocated, which is really nice. So you're in that first step. We're going to talk about some aspects of culture. So it looks like you've got the resources. I know we've talked a bit. It seems like you've got the administrative will there. And it's just shifting that and getting those teachers on board.
Exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And we just started, like, in fact, even today, just really outlining for teachers what it looks like to find those kind of almost power standards within their units and create those assessments, and then working towards looking at that data and what we're going to do with it.
Nice. Yes. Yeah, we're going to dig into this a little bit. I'm excited. And I know we've talked a little bit about carrying your teachers along. And so in our next session, especially, we're going to really get teacher focused. We're going to dig into that a little bit more. And maybe one more. I see Heidi, I see that you are seeing B in one of your 3 schools. And I was wondering, like, is there anything in particular that's standing out to you as like, this is what's making that difference and getting this to be a B school versus an A school?
Yeah, it's just, there's a lot of consistency and a lot of instructional leadership in that particular school. So the grade levels, it also makes it easier because the 2 other schools that I work in are 2 K-3 buildings, whereas this one's a 4-5 building. So all the teachers in 4 and 5 are in that one building. It's easier for scheduling for them to have their data meetings consistently, and they meet for a grade level meeting and then a data team meeting twice a week. And it's consistent, and they're looking at the assessments, the data from the assessments, and then they're using that to drive their next steps in their informing their instruction. So it's just a beautiful process led by a really great building administrator.
That's excellent. Yes, sounds like we're hearing again is that teacher buy-in, having the training and the resources available, that time to do that, and then that structure and those opportunities to really get them feeling comfortable using that time. All right, so we are going to talk today. We're talking about 5 aspects of culture, and we've adapted these from Daring Greatly by Brene Brown, who is absolutely one of my favorite authors. If you haven't read anything by Brene Brown, I highly recommend her. She does some really outstanding work. But the 5 we're going to focus on, and we've adapted these to really be specific to schools. She talks in here a little bit more about culture. Some of it is related to companies. And we've adapted some of the language because some of it maybe doesn't necessarily apply to education. But in here, it's resource allocation. We're going to talk behaviors, expectations, safety, and discomfort. So we're going to dig into each one. As we are going along, so as we talk about this, for each one of these slides, if you are listening or reading this and something in here resonates with you, or you're saying, that's me, that's my school, you're having an aha moment, or this sounds like something that I think we need to change this particular thing. If you would type that in the chat box, that would be really great for us to kind of see as we're going along, what is speaking to you, what's resonating with you. And that will also help us as we're fine tuning the next one for teachers, if we know kind of which aspects of culture are really, we're really needing to dig into a little bit more. So the first one is where and how. And as I said, we're going to have a reflection guide at the end of this. We're going to give you so that you can use this if you would like to dig into what's happening at your own school. And the reflection guide has got each of the questions. It's got some sub questions, some activities that you can complete to really, as you're thinking about your school and kind of processing where that change might need to happen to get that shift. So where and how are stakeholders spending their resources when you look at things like where they're spending their time, their money, and their attention? What data-related initiatives are championed by leadership? What resources have they allocated to it? Sometimes I've worked with schools in the past where they've said, oh, we want to be very data focused and we want to do this. But there hasn't been that framework of resources in place to really support that and make that difference and really carry people along. And sometimes it's the resource allocation that shows your team how much as a leadership you value this particular initiative. And this is something that really is important to us. And I'm showing you this because I'm allocating these resources to it. And there might be other initiatives or priorities in competition for resources. So kind of examining that and seeing how does this compare to those other initiatives, other things that are on teachers' plates in terms of what's competing for those resources. What are teachers spending most of their time, money, and attention on? And I say money because I know there are sites, like Teachers Pay Teachers or others where teachers absolutely are going out and getting, they're getting supplies or they're getting lesson plans, they're getting activities. So where is the focus for teachers? And how does that compare to that focus for the leadership of the school? Who are those major champions of data use? So sometimes you'll have teachers that are really supportive. Sometimes it's a new administration that comes in and says, all right, we're doing this. And sometimes the teachers kind of hunker down and say, this too shall pass. We're just going to ride this one out and comply. And so thinking about who's really championing these initiatives. I know, especially as a coach, because a coach is kind of in a unique position because you're in between the administrators and the teachers. You're not an administrator. And in some ways you're a teacher and you'll probably do a lot of teaching duties. You're going to do modeling. You're going to do maybe covering classes or some other things like that. But really it's finding those like that coalition of the willing, the people who are most interested in joining you and working with you and help you championing that is really important here. And then the other thing to think about, and this is something that Leah and I were talking about the other day, is how are those other human resources? You've got other team members, you've got counselors, you've got coaches, you've got paraprofessionals. How are they being used? And are they being used really in the most effective and strategic ways? Your paraprofessional may not have the training to be that reading interventionist. And so if that's how this is getting assigned, the students are getting assigned to someone who might not be the best fit in terms of helping them with their particular targeted needs, you might have a mismatch between those resources. These are all things to dig into. So if you, as I said, as we're going along, if something here, if you're like, this is me, I see this, please type that in the chat. We want to hear a little bit more about you and your schools and really help understand. I see. Okay. Yes. It's impossible to take a displaced duty day with a substitute. Yes. So there can be definitely, I'm seeing this in the chat, the human resource component can be really, really important. And you're right, after hours, it kind of becomes more interest-based. Are you willing to do this? Are you volunteering? That is a very difficult situation. And yes, resources can be huge in making that difference. All right, next one. What behaviors are rewarded and which are penalized? And when I say this, I do not mean like a formal system. Like if you do this, here you go, you get a little star. And if you do this, or you get a big red X of your name, nothing like that. But there are kind of some of those more subtle things built in. And so we were talking to a coach the other day, and she was saying, for example, they had a session where they were reviewing their benchmarking data, and it was for, I think, reading and mathematics, and the science and social studies teachers did not attend because they thought, well, this is just not relevant for me. So if the culture is such that administration kind of lets that go, like, this happens, then they're getting a reward. It's maybe an unintended reward, but the reward is that they get some time to work on their own planning and do whatever it is that they want to do. And then that behavior gets reinforced, right? They're understanding that this is okay to skip out on these meetings and these data chats because they've decided to make the determination that it doesn't matter for them and for their classroom. So these are what we're talking about when we're saying rewards and penalties. Like, are there some things like that maybe that are going on? Leah, I see you've unmuted. Oh, I know if you want to jump in.
And I think part of it is that the administrators don't realize it's a reward, but the teachers do. And so if you're at a high school level or a middle school level and you have world languages and they are not used to a PLC or PLC model or even working together or looking at data, and they're not responsible for any of really the school-wide data, they are out of the loop and they don't know how it applies to them. And the administration might not even know how it applies to them. But to the ELA teacher and the math teacher, it really can be like, why is the responsibility always on me? Why am I the one that's always losing planning time and always being trained how to look at data when people who are at the same level as I am aren't? And so that is one way that and that's a really difficult subject, moving from school A to school B, is that it has to be school wide. It can't just be for the ELA or the mathematics teachers. It has to be that every teacher is responsible for looking at student level data, because the Spanish teacher also might have a high referral rate. And when that student gets sent to the dean, they're missing Algebra 1 that day, and they're missing something. They're missing a class. It could also possibly be that if they're in the high school level and they need a certain GPA to graduate, they might look at different data other than standardized state data. But the culture should be looking at, what did my grade book say? And so there's different ways to look at this rewarded and penalized and how it looks in a school when you're building a culture. It's not just standardized testing, or it's not just map testing, or it's not just iReady data.
And I will say also, and we'll dig into this more in session 2 when we dig into that teacher, addressing maybe some of those teacher concerns or carrying those teachers along, how to do that, how to really get those teachers on your side with this. But one of the things that Florida did a few years back was they received a grant, and they were awarding it to districts to develop assessments for typically non-tested subject areas like performing arts or physical education, career technical education. And we weren't sure how that would be received by the teachers at first. We thought, well, it might be hard getting them on board with this. They were so excited because they felt that it really was a validation of their content area. And they say, we've never had this chance to get together with other teachers in our particular content areas and dig into some of these things and, look at our standards and unpack them and think about and talk about how we're assessing them. That can be sometimes, especially if they're in a specialized elective, it can be an isolating role. So really thinking about, what are some rewards that can be brought into those teachers? So also, how do those data-related behaviors vary by role? So are there different expectations put on the teacher versus the coach versus the administrator versus the counselor, for example? What extent of the data work is placed squarely on, sometimes it's placed squarely on the coach's shoulders, and the coach is, I'm the one running the data, I'm pulling the reports, I'm doing this, I'm handing this to you, the teacher. And then those differing expectations, I think, can make a difference in terms of the level of accountability and responsibility. And then thinking about just what might need to shift for data use to be rewarded across all the roles. We're going to talk a little bit about expectations. So there's a quote that someone, actually a friend of ours, he's a superintendent chair, and I was like, I love this quote because it's very true. If you see something being done below standard and you ignore it, you've just created a new standard. So thinking about this in terms of expectations and that consistency. So which ones are followed, forced, and ignored? What are those expectations? How might they vary by role? How does school leadership make sure those expectations are followed? How are you consistent about that? And what are you seeing? If you're seeing some of the stakeholders ignoring these expectations, or some of the stakeholders following the expectations, or who's doing what's going on. And that part of that is, when you really dig into this, what's happening at your school, that's where you can begin to pinpoint, and that's where you can take that action and identify what needs to shift for all of the stakeholders to meet those expectations. So you really need to dig into the specifics of these expectation components. The fourth component is supports. Do people feel safe and supported talking about how they feel and what they need? And we've talked a little bit about supports in terms of resources. But one of the things I think that we don't talk about a lot as educators is that we have a couple things going on in our culture, our education culture. And one of them is that teachers are used to being the most knowledgeable person in the room, right? They close the door and they are the expert. And so when you ask them to come out of that, to come into a group of other teachers and do something that is very unfamiliar, that can be a really scary feeling to them. And not only something unfamiliar, but something most of them have really not had sufficient training on. There's so much data out there that shows that we have a dire lack of training on assessment and data analysis and data use in education programs. And it's not just teacher education, it's also administrator education programs. Many of these programs are really lacking in this area. And so what we're asking our teachers to do is to leave the comfort of the room where they know all about their content area and come into this very different setting where it's something they're not familiar with. And really just making sure, as you think about the culture, do they have those supports so that they can talk about what they need and they can feel safe doing that? The other thing I think that I was thinking about earlier was the growth mindset, right? We're so focused on growth mindset for our students. We talk about this growth mindset. You need to practice. You're going to keep learning and doing better. It's okay. It's fine to fail forward as long as you're learning, you're learning as you go. That's okay. But when we think about teachers, I know whenever I was a teacher, I always thought no matter what, and I always did great on my evaluations, but in spite of all that, I was always so nervous because your administration comes in with their rubric and it's, either you met the expectation or you didn't. So we don't have that same growth mindset necessarily in our teaching culture. It's here's your standard, you need to be there. So thinking about that, what's going on in your school in terms of that safety and support for your teachers to really be able to dig into this. And again, share any thoughts, any ahas, anything that's coming up for you as we're going along. All right, here's the last component. This is number 5, that collective tolerance for discomfort. So is that discomfort of learning, of trying new things and giving and receiving feedback normalized? And a lot of this is, who has that opportunity to give feedback? Because in many schools, it's kind of a one-way street, right? The administrator comes in, does the observations. Sometimes it's the coach comes in, does the observation, which often is a teacher-led observation, which is good. But the teachers are often the ones receiving the feedback. And sometimes there's not that opportunity for teachers then to provide that same type of feedback to the coaches, maybe on the training and support they're getting in these initiatives, or to the administration on how these are resourced, or what types of supports they're providing. And so is there that two-way street in place? Like, do you see that happening? And do people feel comfortable doing that? I know, sometimes it can be really uncomfortable if your principal says, tell me what you think about this. You may not say exactly what you feel. If your coach comes in and says, tell me how well I'm supporting you, the inclination is to want to say, oh, you're doing a great job. Yes, Leah. jump on in.
And yeah, and I was going to say that we want our students to have this kind of discomfort when they're learning, but it's very difficult for teachers to translate that desire for the students to grow and learn and take that on themselves. And to try, I know that trying new things is very difficult for various reasons. It may be that they have been teaching for many, many years and they've had success. And so there might not be a need to try new things. It also might be that when I try a new thing and somebody shows up unexpectedly and new things don't always work well, now what if something goes wrong and I have a walkthrough or an observation, depending on any type of evaluation system your school is based on, or if a principal is walking through and you're trying something new and it goes very wrong. And so, when you're thinking about sharing data and you're thinking about, I'm going to share my data with my principal, I'm going to share my data with my other teachers, I'm going to share my data with my coach, there might be a level of discomfort with that as well. And I think in one of the chat boxes is that somebody said that sharing data was scary. And that can be really hard because it's hard if somebody else is more successful. It's difficult if you are working, like depending on your school and where you're at, sometimes students are grouped based on their master schedule. So you might have a large number of students who have special needs or maybe English language learners, and they aren't scoring as high on any sort of standards-based assessment. And then you go to share that data, and without an understanding of, it's more difficult, or they need scaffolds or a dictionary or something else, that can be really scary your first year out. It can also be really scary for new teachers who we have a lot of teachers with alternative certification. And so they're learning how to teach while they're teaching. And that can be really scary to share your data if you're not really 100% sure you know what you're doing and you don't necessarily always feel like you're successful in the classroom. And now you have to share your data. And so these are all places where this feedback loop comes in, and making a really safe environment and allowing them to find discomfort kind of all go together as one.
Yes. And that training also, where they have that framework so they understand, it's the data is situated such that the teachers, kind of collectively understand if this teacher has got a really high population of English learners in this particular classroom, we're going to take that into consideration while we're looking at the data. And we're not going, to have this culture where, we're judging, or, we're thinking less of the instruction because we don't understand the data or the student populations. So, and we are, so I know we're getting kind of close to the time. So I'm actually going to skip the next one and jump straight to we have a breakout session activity. We're going to let you guys get into small groups, and we'd like for you in your groups. We're just going to talk about kind of culture at a high level, share just a brief overview of what's going on in your school or your district related to data. What are you interested in changing? And then as we were talking about those 5 aspects, the resource allocation, the behaviors, expectations, support, or discomfort, and feedback, which of those was most resonating with you and saying, aha, this is probably the thing that we need to really delve into first at our school as we're looking at shifting. So one moment, I'm going to send everyone into breakouts. If you'll hold, please. And we're going to take about 8 to 10 minutes. I'll pop in and kind of see how everyone is going along. Thank you all. I know I was kind of popping in and out of the room. Some of you all were having some lively discussions, and some of you, I think, were in a place where you could not really talk that much. So we are going to, we're just going to take a few moments and share with you some information about data savvy coaching. And really, so data savvy coaching is a membership that Leah and I have developed to bridge that gap between curriculum and instruction and assessment, and data. And so I'm going to show you just some of the resources that are available within the Data Savvy Coaching Group. I mentioned earlier, our plan is to make it our goal, was to make it plug and play resources. So these are things, you get presentations that you can take and use with your faculty. You have trainings that give you background information about each. I'm going to show you some examples. And then we actually have a couple of members that are here. And I'm going to ask them if they would just share maybe some of their experiences within the group. So let me hop on over. So here you'll see we have, this is what the membership site looks like once you're in. This is the Data Central. This is the resource library component. And I'm just going to drop into one of these modules. So we've designed each one where it has, we have background information, which is information designed for you as the educational leader. So this is training videos or activities or resources that you would do to really help expand your knowledge. That's the background component. And then we have take and use activities. And with the take and use activities, we have a short overview video where we explain to you how you could use these with your own faculty. And then you can see here, we have things like, here's a presentation on different assessment types. Here's a worksheet that you can use with your faculty as they're reflecting on assessments. We have instructions for how to do it. And then we have the actual worksheets in there that you can take and use with your faculty. And so the goal really is to make it easy for you. So it's totally plug and play. You've got it right here. It's there. These are the resources that we wish we had when we were coaches, the trainings we wish we had when we were coaches to help us cross that divide between that curriculum and instruction and the assessment and data piece and carry those teachers along. And so I know Jana and Alyssa they're here joining us, and they are both members of Data Savvy Coaching right now. So I didn't know if you all would be willing to maybe say a couple words about your experiences.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so my name is Alyssa Tyra, and I'm a first-year instructional coach at a district that has never had instructional coaches. So not only is it my first year, it's their first year having one as well. One thing that I'm really enjoying about this Data Savvy Coaching so far is how personable it is. I've met with Heather and Leah twice now, just kind of by myself. And I kind of explained to them what was going on with my school, what we're kind of focusing on. And they were both very quick to give advice, to give feedback. They hopped on the State Department website and pulled some resources that applied to me and my situation. And so it's very catered to what I needed. So I've really enjoyed that so far.
Thank you so much. We're enjoying having you. Yes.
I agree. Yeah, the personal piece is excellent, and they're always quick to get back to you with any questions or anything like that. We've met a few times as well, and it's been very helpful. I also love the tools on the website. They've been very helpful, especially in planning our professional development for our staff and sharing it with my coaching partner, and kind of giving us a little bit more of a background and a solid foundation for moving forward with using data to drive instruction. So those have been invaluable so far this year.
Thank you all so much. We so appreciate that. And like I said, we're having fun doing this. We really love working with coaches. Our most favorite times working are when we do actually get to work with schools, and I think that's where you have the biggest impact for teachers, for students, and that's work that's really rewarding and meaningful. So we are hoping that more of you would love to join us. We are still in content developments now. So we have some content, we're continually building it out. And if you join as an early adopter, then you are one of the influencers of that content. So the content is developed and it is more personalized and customized to you and what you and your school needs. So, all right, so let me now jump into, let me come back to the presentation. I wanted to share the instructions for downloading the digital reflection notebook. And let me make sure this is, oh goodness, and I just skipped right past that. So here is the website that you'll go to. It's educationfoundationsllc.com/cc-downloads. And I will also be sending out an email, and so that you will have that as well. But if you go to this website, you will see, and we've got 2 reflection notebooks, one for today's and one for Wednesday's session. So this first one is digging into school culture. And just click on the download button and it should pop up on your screen. And then if you click at the top right, you'll see this download button. You should be able to get it. It's a PDF file and you can print it and use it for looking into your school culture a little bit more closely. So the next steps from here are download and print out that reflection workbook. Spend time reflecting on your school's current culture, needs, any next step. And we would love for you to share any questions, any ahas, any next step in that data analysis coaching Facebook group. That would be really great. And again, really just help us make sure that what we're doing, the trainings, everything that we're working toward and developing is most relevant for you. And then we'd love for you to join us for session 2. Session 2, we're going to talk teachers. So why your teachers may not be using their data and what to do about it. And that's going to be 2 days from now, same time, 1:30. So we would love to see you there. And thank you all so much for joining us.
Thanks.
We so appreciate it. We'll see you Wednesday, we hope. Thank you.